Years later, one of the most powerful things I think I've ever done in my life was to say a prayer many, many years later when I was doing this great seeking thing. And I found myself on a park bench in the middle of nowhere, literally, Bishop, California, kind of nowhere. And I said a prayer. And I just basically prayed to the universe, and I just said, well, whatever it takes to find some completion with this enlightenment thing, I don't care anymore. I take all constraints off. If I need a wonderful life of luxury in order to accomplish it, I'll take it. If I need an absolutely horrendously difficult life in order to help me with this, I'll take that. I just take all constraints off. And that was part of my prayer. And I've often said ever since then that I call that a true prayer, which doesn't mean any other form of prayer isn't true. But it's just a way of saying that when you say that, certainly when I did, it was frightening. Because I knew that some way I was rewriting the contract with the universe. And boy, did it respond very quickly. And I got everything that I needed. And some of it was wonderful and some of it was terrible and horrific. But it opened something up. It was like a key. And I look back on that prayer out in the middle of that valley, in the middle of nowhere, sat on that park bench. And I can see so much turned at that moment. And I think that's why I was afraid as I was saying it, because I didn't know consciously, but deep down I knew that everything was going to change. And it was because I was basically taking all the constraints away. And since then I've told that story many times, and I've had so many people tell me their stories of, yeah, I remember when I said a prayer like that. And so often they say, and all hell broke loose. And given enough time, they always look back and go, and it's the best thing I ever did. If they're in the middle of it, they may not be so convinced it was the best thing.
Yeah.
So I found that prayer is can be extremely powerful. Can be extremely powerful. Because I think there is a way in which there's the possibility that we can almost like it's rewriting an agreement that we didn't even know we had.
Yeah.
You know, because we can have an agreement in conscious that basically says, well, I really want this, but God or universe, I want you to play softball with me. I want it to be as kind and sweet and easy as it can be. But I think if with that intensity gets hot enough towards whatever we're drawn towards, we start to remove the constraints. We start to have a different attitude. We start to have what I've always thought that after that, or not just after that, but things that subsequently happen, that the impulse towards enlightenment is an irrational impulse. It's irrational. Because it's the impulse that will say something like that. Give me any kind of life. It transcends our desire for ease, for comfort, even for safety. And in that sense, it just it's not rational when compared to most of the other things we do as a human being. It's wild, it's woolly, you start to realize you're wrestling with something that's way, way bigger than you. And once you've given the keys away and said, here, I'm putting it in your hands. I'm rewriting my contract. I'm taking the constraints off. That impulse can, and often does, play itself out in ways that we never imagined. Some frightening and some wonderful. And to me, I mean, boy, talking about powerful.
Yeah.
And I've prayed lots of times in my life too. But I've always found that when I had a prayer that included this kind of rewriting my relationship with life, that those were the prayers that seemed to have quick, immediate, and powerful responses. And when I would pray, oh, I'm in a difficult spot, please kind of help me out if you can spare the time, so often, nothing.
Yeah.
It's almost like some intelligence is just waiting, saying, okay, are you ready to get off yourself? Are you ready to change your agreement? Because that's what's necessary, and so often we're kind of praying like, please make it go the way I want, which that's okay too. Yeah. Because sometimes that's where we are. We're afraid and we're overwhelmed, and because I've had that kind of prayer earlier at times in my life, and that's to me that's a prayer of humility, of open-heartedness, also of desperation. But I think it takes a kind of courage to be desperate.
Yeah.
When you are desperate.
That's right.
To really
let yourself acknowledge that you are.
Right.
Yeah.
You're at the end of what you can do. Or it takes humility to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have like an idea, like an anthropomorphic idea of God as a deity out there. I was just throwing it out there. The universe always seemed to be a place of extraordinary intelligence to me. Extraordinary. There's a relational thing that's happening that's, I think, prayer taps into.
It makes me think that wisdom doesn't come from inside or outside, and that prayer, like you're talking about, it's like a call, right? I like the description you have. It's declarative. It wasn't really a question. You declared a line in the sand.
Yeah, and basically saying, and I will do anything to address my own calling.
Yeah,
I'll open myself up.
Yeah.
That's why right after it, I'm like, what have I done? I literally felt like, what have I done? And I intuitively felt also like,
try to take it back.
I can't take it back. I had some feeling like even if I said, God or whatever, I'm sorry for that, I want to take it back, I just knew there's no way.
I felt that way when I came to work for you. I don't know where this is going, but I can't take it back.
Well, being here together is a pretty good example of that. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. Thank you for telling me about your prayer.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of people hear that and be inspired and say their own version of it, and they've often come back and said, in the middle of like, whoa, I'm wondering if that was such a great idea.
Yeah.
And that's why actually I literally like to tell folks, I tell them, don't mess around with this stuff. Don't make that prayer unless you really believe it.
Yeah.
Because the universe is, whatever you want to call it, it's listening and it responds. This is all one, that's what oneness means. It's one whole, complete thing.
Yeah. And
anything you declare is affecting the whole thing. Not in ways that you can necessarily dictate. You can't dictate how it's going to affect, but I think you can participate in that it does affect. And if you kick something off out of mere interest,
oh yeah,
you may not be ready for what you set in motion.
Yeah.